Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Of who you and the Great Wahoo. In past episodes of Pooh, You, and the Great Wahoo, we have been exploring the West Boise wastewater treatment plant. We checked out the headworks building, where the sewage first comes into the plant, and solids like nuts and bolts and wedding rings are separated from the water. We then followed the water out to the primary clarifiers. The primary clarifiers settle the water down and let the floatables, like oil and grease, rise to the top, and they let heavy solids sink to the bottom. These solids are called sludge. This sludge is mostly organic and is called biosolids. It is sent to the biosolid processor. We've seen that in the biosolid processors, this sludge is turned into, basically, manure and is sent out to a farm south of Boise to be reused in the food cycle. It makes excellent compost. But never fear, the food that is grown from this product is only used as animal fodder. There is some water extracted in the biosolids processing, and that water is sent back to the primary clarifiers, where it joins all the water that has come in from the headworks building. After the water has been separated from the floatables and solids in the primary clarifiers, the water is sent to the aeration basins. The aeration basins pump vast amounts of air into the water. This air is so that the microorganisms that are in the sewage will go crazy eating. The fact is, there is organic solid material that gets through the primary clarifiers. This organic material is basically just good old food for these microorganisms. By pumping the water full of air, we encourage these microorganisms to eat and eat. We fatten them up real good. While they fatten up, they are consuming organic solids from the water. Having gotten these microorganisms good and fat, all we have to do is send them to another clarifier where we will let them settle out of the water. And that will take care of most of the organic solids that are in our sewage. So today we're going to move from the aeration basins to the secondary clarifiers. The secondary clarifiers are located to the west of the aeration basins. This is handy since the slope of the land is generally toward the west, and so the water flows into the secondary clarifiers. When the organisms come into the secondary clarifiers from the aeration basins, they are stuffed full. They are stuffed full, they are heavy, and as soon as they hit the calm water of the clarifier, they sink to the bottom. Unlike the primary clarifiers, where most of the solids are poo, here almost all of the solids are these organisms. Just like in the primary clarifiers, The solid waste that sinks to the bottom of the clarifier and is scraped by the slowly rotating scraper, once again is called sludge. However, in the secondary clarifiers, it is called activated sludge. It is activated because it is these microorganisms that are very active consuming sewage. This activated sludge is quite a different beast than the sludge that is found in the primary clarifiers. Because of this, these secondary clarifiers have this long pole called the sludge judge. An operator goes out on the catwalk and lowers this pole down into the water in order to measure how deep the sludge is. There's also a little cup on it that takes a sample of the sludge. Letting the sludge get too deep and holding it too long will cause low dissolved oxygen and will regenerate more of the bacteria that cause sewer gas. Also, holding this activated sludge too long will make it so that some of the predatory microorganisms will start to eat some of the other not quite so predatory microorganisms. Since we want to maintain a good balance of the different microorganisms, this sludge judge has an important job to do, keeping this activated sludge behaving itself. This activated sludge is really pretty precious stuff. The truth is, there are many different factors that affect how quickly the bacteria consume solid wastes in the aeration basins. This is especially true of the temperature. In the winter, the bacteria are not as active as when it's warmer out. So it takes more microorganisms to consume the solid wastes than during the summer. This process is very carefully monitored, and to put more bacteria into the aeration basins, they take this activated sludge and use as much as they need to keep the proper balance in the aeration basins. Inside the headworks building, this return activated sludge, or RAS, is mixed with water that is coming from the primary clarifiers. When I first saw this large pipe in the headworks building, I thought, man, these guys sure like to party if they need that big a pipe of mixed liquor. Actually, mixed liquor is a combination of RAS, the return activated sludge from the secondary clarifiers, mixed with water from the primary clarifier that is going toward the aeration basins. By returning the activated sludge, the system returns about 65% of the organisms so that the cycle can keep on being fed. As we have seen, this activated sludge is called RAS. Literally, these microorganisms have a life of eating, resting, and eating again. That's what they do, and we feed them just as much as they can possibly chew. The remaining 35% of the activated sludge that is not needed in order to keep the process balanced is sent out to the solids processor and digester. Eventually, it joins the manure wagon to the farm south of Boise. Since this sludge is wasted, it is called waste activated sludge, or WAS. WAS, RAS, and mixed liquor are very important ingredients in the process of breaking down sewage. And these three aspects of sewage treatment are constantly monitored and cared for. So that is the important process of removing the solids in the secondary clarifiers. Just like the primary clarifiers, these secondary clarifiers also separate what remaining floatables are in the water. A little bit of oil and grease does get through, and it floats once again to become scum. The difference is that while the primary clarifiers had quite a lot of scum, these secondary clarifiers have hardly any. This is the arm of a primary clarifier scooping the scum off the top of the water. This is a close-up view of the arm of a secondary clarifier. You can see how little scum there is after the primary clarifier and the aeration basins have done their job. Here in the secondary clarifier, even the little basin that scoops the scum off is clean. Just like the primary clarifier, the secondary clarifier takes the water out from the middle of the tank, since it is neither sinking nor floating. Here we see the water running over the weir plates in the primary clarifier. After the water has been through the aeration basins and the secondary clarifier, this is how the water looks going over the weir plates. There are 3 primary clarifiers and 6 secondary clarifiers. This gives the water lots of time to sit in the secondary clarifiers and have the solids and floatables almost completely separate from the water. By now, the water no longer smells, and, as you can tell, it is no longer brown. At the weir plates in these secondary clarifiers, the water is so clean that these sprayers are used to keep whatever little particles are still left from gathering up and affecting the water. As you can see, there is a lot of algae growing in this water. Unlike the primary clarifiers, where some algae does grow, but there are so many contaminants that it doesn't like to grow all that much. This water is rich in nitrogen and phosphorus, 2 chemicals that algae really loves to grow in, and in the meantime, the rest of the water is so clear that, just like being in a mountain stream, the algae is free to grow. The algae is perfectly natural, and ducks love to eat it, so it's not something that we worry too much about, but we certainly don't want to send it all to the river where it would just be too much algae. Removing this algae is one of 3 important steps left in our cleaning the water and making it ready for the river. To perform these important steps, the water leaves the secondary clarifiers and is piped out to the ultraviolet building. What magic happens in the ultraviolet building, we will look into on our next episode of Pooh, You, and the Great Wahoo. It's time to drive Steens Mountain. Good old Oregon. It's known for the Willamette Valley and the coast. But out here on the eastern side of Oregon, there's a big hole that I always thought was just filled with desert. Lordy, was I ever wrong about that. There's some great country just waiting for a little 1 or 2 or 3 day drive right in our back door. A good excuse to go adventuring in this country is driving to the top of Steens Mountain. These Steens Mountains are the ones that you see off to the west as you drive from Winnemucca to Jordan Valley. Getting to the top of Steens Mountain itself can be rather difficult because of snow. For that reason, I decided to go in July of the year 2008. We'll go exploring the very tippy top of Steens Mountain during our adventures, and from there we'll go south, looking around the deserts south of that area, and over to Alturas, California, back through the deserts of northern Nevada, and then the deserts on the east side of the Steens Mountain. On previous episodes of Driving Steens, we made it to beautiful little French Glen. From French Glen, we headed about, a few hundred yards south and found the little dirt road that takes us up Steens Mountain. I was getting antsy to get up Steens Mountain. I wanted to see the top of the hill, but we found some beautiful wildflowers, couldn't help stopping. It seemed to be taking forever. After dipping down through McCoy Creek, we came up to where we started to get on the backside of the Steens mountain range itself. This 30-mile-long fault block was pushed up out of the earth some 15 million years ago. On the east side, it rises 1 mile directly above the Alvord Desert, and then to the west, it takes a long, long slope. Just about as we got to where we were driving along the ridge of Steens Mountain, we found a little sign saying Gorge. Last week, we walked out on this little path, found one of the most phenomenal things I've seen. I'm sure glad I decided I wasn't in such a hurry that I would pass this up. As I walked back to the car, the trail offered up even more delightful alpine flowers. And I couldn't resist getting one more shot along the western wall of this fascinating gorge. As I headed back to the road that would take us to the top of Steens Mountain, I once again enjoyed the broad backside, the western slope of this mountain. And I enjoyed one of my favorite views, that of the road ahead. Here the road runs just along the west side of the mountain. Now there is one thing for sure about my illustration, and that is that the road is not to perspective. Needless to say, the road would be merely a dot on this mountain. But it was a dot that I thoroughly enjoyed driving, and I was glad to have it there. As you can see, a canyon on the right pushed the road out toward the edge that was on the left. I soon remembered that in this country they are not canyons, they are gorges. It turned out that this is the Little Blitzen Gorge. The Little Blitzen River flows past French Glen and up to this spot. The Little Blitzen Gorge cuts up through that long western slope of the Steens mountain range. It was early July. As you can tell, the air that settles in over Boise in the summer settles in through eastern Oregon as well. As we look along the north rim of the Little Blitzen Gorge, we see the road off in the distance, which we have traveled getting to this spot. Little Blitzen Gorge is on the west. When we walk across the road and look over to the east, we look down 1 mile to the Alvord Desert. Fascinating as all this is, I'm still not to the top of Steens Mountain. So I get back in the car and once again enjoy this winding road out along the ridge of the Steens Mountains. And, sure enough, off in the distance does appear what must be the top of the hill. These days you can always tell the top of a hill because it has all the communication towers. Just to verify that acute observation, we soon come to a junction in the road that actually leads to several roads meandering off in different directions. We've come 26 miles from French Glen. We've driven to an elevation of 9,500 feet. And a branch in the road tells us we're only 2.5 miles from the summit of Steens Mountain. The Mega Corporation was having a terrible time with slackers. They just couldn't get anything done. The board of directors decided it was time to shake things up and shake them up good. So they hired a new CEO. It turns out Clyde was just the man for the job. He was getting along in years. He needed something on his resume that would pad out his retirement years. There was no one more determined than Clyde to go in and shake things up just the way Maga Aga wanted them done. To start things rolling, Clyde went to the Maga Aga pimento plant and took himself a look around. Right off the bat, he noticed a younger-looking guy hanging out at the water cooler, leaning on the wall, not seeming to get much done. He knew there were a lot of people in the room, and he knew that they were watching this new guy walking around, so he thought this was his perfect opportunity. Clyde rushed right over to the kid and says, "How much do you make a week?" The kid was obviously shocked and shaken, but did manage to squeak out, "Well, sir, I make $400 a week." Clyde took out a wad of bills and counted out some money. "Here," he says, here's $1,600, 4 weeks' pay. Now get out and don't come back." Well, the kid was pretty shaken up. All he could do was grab the money and run out the door. Clyde was real satisfied with himself, especially when he turned around and he saw all the wide eyes staring at him in disbelief. Clyde knew he had made his point and that from now on he was going to get some action around this place. "So," Clyde says to the people that were staring at him, "who can tell me what that slacker did around here anyway?" People were so stunned they didn't say anything. Come on, Clyde says. "Tell me what that slacker did around here." Finally, from the back of the group, there came one rather timid reply. He was the pizza delivery guy." That's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week. In the meantime, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo!